Hey y'all, Raging Catfish here. Today we're getting political. We're gonna rank every US president. So, starting off with George Washington. Um, well, he did own slaves, but he did set them free after his death. He helped to create the Constitution. He led the colonies in the Revolutionary War, and he founded, basically all our systems that we have today in the United States. If he did not own slaves, I know it was accepted at the time, but if he did not own slaves, he would easily be S tier. I'm gonna have to put him in a high A, just because owning slaves is wrong, right? Like, whether or not it was legal, that's still a wrong thing, even if it was accepted in society at that point. Let's go on to John Adams. John Adams, he was only a one-term president. He never owned slaves, which is very nice, but he signed the Alien and Sedition Acts, which basically it made immigrating to the U.S. harder and criminalized negative statements about the government, which is not good. Not good at all. But he did keep the U.S. out of war with France because there were some tensions there. But the Alien and Sedition Acts, very bad. I don't know. We've had some bad presidents. I don't know if I should put him in D or C. He didn't own slaves. I have to put him in D. Maybe like a higher D. But we'll see. I'll change stuff later if I need to. Alright, Thomas Jefferson. Two-term president. He had the Louisiana Purchase, which is nice. He cut the size of the military. He lowered taxes. He stopped all trade with Europe during the Napoleonic Wars, but he did own slaves. Thomas Jefferson. Ooh. I'm between B and C again. I'm between two tiers. I think just the amount of positive changes he made, I think he can go in B tier, even though he did own slaves. Like, the Louisiana Purchase was big. So, now James Madison. He was two terms. He cut the military size again. He had the War of 1812. But then he signed a peace treaty. So that war started and ended with him. He established the second bank of the U.S. He owned slaves. And he weakened the power of the federal government, which is not bad. James Madison. I'm not a big war guy. I'm gonna put him in... He owned slaves. I'll put him in C tier. Now we have James Monroe. Two terms, again. He had the Monroe Doctrine, which protected the Americas from European colonization, which is nice. There was the Missouri Compromise. Yeah, the Missouri Compromise was James Monroe. He was not exactly anti-slavery, but he wasn't exactly pro-slavery. Well, he did own slaves, so he was pro-slavery. But yeah, Missouri Compromise, not a good thing. I mean, it could have been worse, I guess. But there was also the Panic of 1819, which was an economic crisis, which collapsed the economy. This was not good. I am thinking D tier. I'll put him there. John Quincy Adams. Is that John Quincy Adams? Yeah. Okay. He was one term. He had significant investments in infrastructure, which is nice. We needed that at the time. 1825 to 1829. He was outspoken against slavery, which at the time was a big deal for John Quincy Adams, but he had the corrupt bargain with the Speaker of the House to get elected, and he promoted the Speaker of the House to Secretary of State when he was elected. So there was some shady stuff going on there with his election, maybe why he was only a one-term president. But I'm still gonna give B tier. All politicians do shady stuff. He was anti-slavery, so that's pretty good. And infrastructure. No, I'll go him. I'll put him there. Andrew Jackson, two-term president. He had the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears, which is not a good thing. I think most people would agree. He owned slaves. Most people would also agree, not a good thing. He dismantled the Bank of the U.S. because of corruption and general favoring of wealthy people. Could be good or bad depending on what you think. Then there was the Panic of 1837, an economic depression. So overall, Andrew Jackson, pretty bad. Pretty bad. Like, the Trail of Tears. He was a two-term president, too. I don't get it. I'm sorry. I gotta put Andrew Jackson in F tier. First F tier president. Well, spoiler alert. We'll be seeing some more of those, I'm sure. Alright. Martin Van Buren. I do not know what Martin Van Buren looks like, so I'm gonna have to hope that this is in order. That's William Henry Harrison, right? Yeah, I'm sure this is Martin Van Buren. I'm sure it is. If not, oops, but, he's one turn. There was still an economic depression during his presidency. He opposed the annexation of Texas. He was outspoken against slavery, but he did own slaves. So, he didn't really help with an economic depression. I think I'm gonna put him, like, middle of D tier. Not very great. William Henry Harrison. He was president for 31 days before dying, and he owned slaves. That's basically all he did. He was 68. 1841, not 1841. This is a hard one. This is probably the hardest one, William Henry Harrison. I'm gonna put him, like, maybe top of D tier. because he did own slaves, but he didn't do anything else bad, really, and that was like acceptable at the time. He didn't do anything really good either. He didn't do much of anything except own slaves. So now, John Tyler. He vetoed the creation of a new national bank, which got the Whig Party so mad at him that they expelled him, so he was partyless. Um, he did own slaves, and he annexed Texas, but that led to the Mexican-American War. So overall, not very good, John Tyler. Not very good. Like, probably the best thing he did was he annexed Texas, right? He got Texas for the U.S., but that led to a war, right? So, I'm gonna have to go F tier for John Tyler. Maybe a high F, but still an F. James Polk. One term. He had to deal with the Mexican-American War, of course. He settled a boundary dispute with Britain. But new territories that were added to the U.S., he did not designate them as free or slave states. He just kind of left that for Zachary Taylor to decide, right? And he did own slaves. For James Polk, I'm gonna go. Right around here. I'll be generous. Put him in C. Actually, no. I'm gonna bump him down to D. Gonna be a lot of D tiers if we're being honest here. We had Zachary Taylor, another Whig. He died of cholera in office, but he owned slaves and he made California a free state. That's pretty much, that's all the notes I have on Zachary Taylor. Making California a free state was a big deal. He did own slaves, but obviously he was a little more progressive, making California free. So we'll put Zachary Taylor in C tier. All right, we got Millard Fillmore. Actually, I don't know if I want to rank these presidents within the tiers. Yeah, I don't think I will. I'll just generally say a high or low or mid, whatever tier, but I'm not necessarily putting a president over another president. I'm just saying they're comparable, I guess. So, we got Millard Fillmore, another Whig. He had the Compromise of 1850, which basically the North and South hated. Not much of a compromise that made everybody angry. He made the Fugitive Slave Act, which meant escaped slaves must be returned, even in free states. But he never owned slaves and was anti-slavery. So I don't know how you do the Fugitive Slave Act. I'm gonna put him in D tier. He didn't own slaves. He was generally anti-slavery, which are really good. But Fugitive Slave Act, come on, man. Like, that's bad. All right, we have Franklin Pierce, Democrat, 1 term. The Kansas-Nebraska Act, which repealed the Missouri Compromise. He had the Gadsden Purchase, got some more land. He was denied the renomination by the Democratic Party. And he largely contributed to the Civil War. And then there was Bleeding Kansas, of course, which was some violence over slavery in Kansas. Franklin Pierce did not... He did not really help the slavery issue or the tensions between the North and the South. He is a big reason the Civil War happened, because he could not get that under control. I'm going to put him in another D tier. Alright, James Buchanan, Democrat. 1 term. During his presidency, there was the Dred Scott decision, which I think we can all agree is bad. The South seceded, the Civil War started, and he owned slaves, kinda. So, really, I think that's a clear-cut F tier. Not gonna lie. Okay. Now we have Abraham Lincoln, Republican. Almost 2 terms, or less than 2 terms. He ended the Civil War. He had the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, which is a great thing. And he never owned slaves. So, he led the Union in the Civil War. He freed the slaves, both really good things. However, he jailed 2,000 political opponents without trials or charges, which is kind of crazy. I cannot put him in S tier because of that. I gotta put him in A. A for Abraham Lincoln. There we go. Let me see. Andrew Johnson. He purchased Alaska. He was impeached, but acquitted by 1 vote. And I believe he was impeached because he violated the Tenure of Office Act, which means he was removing civil officers without senatorial consent. He oversaw Reconstruction, but he did own slaves prior to his presidency. I think that's another D tier for Andrew Johnson. Now we have Ulysses S. Grant, Republican. He had the 15th Amendment, which meant black Americans can now vote, which was great, right? Well, black men, women still couldn't vote, which, very terrible. There's the Treaty of Washington, which settled border disputes with Britain. It's like the 2nd or 3rd time that's happened. He was thought to be a corrupt politician. We don't have, like, I guess, concrete evidence that he was, like, super corrupt, but he was thought to be, like, shady. But he did some good things. He owned 1 slave, though. Ulysses S. Grant, I'm going to put in C tier. And we have Hayes. Rutherford B. Hayes, Republican. He's 1 term. He ended Reconstruction, and he was the Jim Crow law guy. I think that's another F tier. Pretty simple. Not much in the post-Abraham Lincoln era that can justify Jim Crow laws, you know? So, Let's go on to James Garfield, Republican. He was assassinated 200 days into office. He fought for education rights for black people, which is good. And anti-corruption in government hiring, also good. I think Garfield, I'm gonna put in B tier. Is that Chester Arthur? I hope so. He served less than a term. He handed out government jobs before he was elected. Kinda shady. He grew the Navy and he reformed the tariff system. I think overall, though, Chester Arthur, I'm gonna put him D. Maybe like a high D. I don't know. But D tier. Grover Cleveland. There was an economic depression during his 2 terms. Let me see. He sent troops to break the Pullman strike. When the Pullman strike is when railroad workers were striking because of hirings and wage cuts. He sent troops to break that up. Not a big fan of that. Congress limited his power to fire people, but he fought to gain this back. So overall, Grover Cleveland, not that great. I'm gonna have to put him in D tier. Again, really filling out this D tier here. Hopefully, we get some better presidents soon. Benjamin Harrison. I think Benjamin Harrison is probably better. I don't know what Benjamin Harrison looks like. I'm gonna assume that this is Benjamin Harrison. All right. Because that's McKinley, and that's Roosevelt. So, and that's Taft. So, yeah. Benjamin Harrison, he had the Sherman Antitrust Act, which basically just banned monopolies, which I think is a great thing. He had the McKinley Tariff. Oh, McKinley. Huh. Wonder where he got that name for the tariff. Which he taxed foreign goods to promote American industry. Also a nice thing, but he did print a lot more money and largely caused an economic depression. So, he did some good things, did some bad things. I think overall, this is C tier, maybe a high C tier. Causing an economic depression by printing more money, kind of dumb, but would put him in B tier if he didn't cause a depression, you know. Maybe even like high B tier, low A tier, you know, because the McKinley Tariff and Sherman Antitrust Act, very good, right? But now we're on to William McKinley. He will not be getting credit for the McKinley Tariff, although he is the one who proposed it. It was not during his presidency. During his presidency, there was the Spanish-American War. He acquired places like Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam. He put more tariffs on foreign goods, and he was assassinated. So he did a little bit of conquering of other places, you know, which isn't good. McKinley, conquering of other places, like the imperialism, I gotta put him D tier. He did some good things, but he did some really bad things. So, put him in D tier. Now we're on to Theodore Roosevelt, Republican. I believe our youngest president. He was 42 when he was elected in 1901. Not elected, but promoted from vice president to president when William McKinley was assassinated, of course. He did participate in, like, the imperialism, the conquering of, like, the Philippines, which is not good. Alright, I'm gonna make that clear. Not good. But that was not during his presidency. He was not president during that, so I'm not gonna really hold that against him. Lucky for Roosevelt, because he's got some good stuff here. He ended the Russo-Japanese War, which earned him a Nobel Peace Prize. It's really nice. I believe only a couple other presidents have Nobel Peace Prizes. Obama and Jimmy Carter. Does he have one? That was for after he was president, though, right? So, but Nobel Peace Prize, very nice. He had the Food and Drug Safety Regulations, which is great, right? Making sure Americans are healthy. He had a lot of trust busting. He was really hard on trusts or monopolies, right? Which is great. He built the Panama Canal, also great. Helped not just the United States, but the whole world. And he had the big stick diplomacy, of course, which is speak softly and carry a big stick. I think this is S tier for Theodore Roosevelt. Yeah. I mean, yeah. The only real knock on him I have is before his presidency and after his presidency. He had him running again for basically a third term. Not really, but basically a third term. And splitting the vote with Taft. But that wasn't during his presidency either, so really, because of that, I'm putting Roosevelt S tier. Now we have William Howard Taft, the big boy. He passed the 16th Amendment, which was federal income tax. Boo. He was not as tough on monopolies as Roosevelt. He really cut off most of that, right? He still had some antitrust practices, but not really what you needed during the Gilded Age. You know, he improved the postal service. I'm gonna be real, D tier for William Howard Taft. I mean, that might seem a little harsh, but really, in the Gilded Age, you needed to be super antitrust. Really, you know, like that. That's why Roosevelt's so good, you know. Taft just didn't hit the same. And that brings us to Woodrow Wilson, which only got elected because of Roosevelt, which is another knock against Roosevelt. But it was post his presidency, so it doesn't really count. Of course, Woodrow Wilson brought us into World War I, right? He established the Federal Reserve. He had the Clayton Antitrust Act, which was okay. But really, World War I, the big thing. I think he ran on, like, keeping us out of the war, you know? But then he ended up bringing us into it, so I going back on your promise like that, that's a D tier. Not F, not quite F, but that's a D tier. Now we have Warren G. Harding. Alright, we're into the 1920s. He deregulated businesses. Okay. He had the Teapot Dome scandal. He leased oil with bribing. He served for less than a term. Does it say? I don't have why he served less than a term. Actually, let me look that up. Because I do not remember. I am having a hard time seeing why. Oh, he died of a heart attack. There we go. That's why. That is tragic. But I think Warren G. Harding. I mean, for the time, I'll put him in D tier. You know. Alright, now we get to Calvin Coolidge. Basically the entire 20s, roaring 20s. It's an economic boom. He cut taxes and debt. He didn't interfere with the free market. He reduced regulations on businesses. And there was a big economic boom. A lot of this, his non-interference, with like, not non-interference, but like his interference with the market did cause like an economic boom, but it also partially contributed to the Great Depression. The Calvin Coolidge, I'm gonna put him in B. Now we have Herbert Hoover, the man himself, basically just blamed for the Great Depression. I don't think it's quite that black and white. I think Calvin Coolidge potentially did some contribution to that, right? But Great Depression, he didn't really help it, really. He used yeah, that's basically Great Depression. That's basically all I have. Just several notes basically saying he caused the Great Depression. So yeah, I feel bad putting Herbert Hoover in F. Because as far as I know, he wasn't like super racist or anything. As far as I know, he was a stand-up guy, but his presidency, not that great, if we're being honest. Now we get into Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Yeah, he had over 3 terms, which is insane. He basically had 4 terms. He had the New Deal, of course, which helped with the Great Depression significantly. He led us into World War II. He attempted to pack the Supreme Court, which is bad. Alright? Gonna say that's bad. And he had internment camps for Japanese Americans during World War II, which is bad. Bad. Boo. Boo internment camps for Japanese Americans. If it wasn't for that, he'd be a lot higher. You know, but that is just not something you can get over. I'm gonna put him in C tier. right? He's better than the riffraff, but he did some bad things, you know? It's hard to find any president that did no bad things, but Franklin, Roosevelt, FDR, he did some bad stuff, alright? Still gonna put him in C, because he did do some really good stuff, but really mixed bag there. So I'm putting him right in the middle. Well, actually, most presidents, I'd say, are bad. Like, I hate to say that because I love this country. I love the history of this country. But I think we can mostly agree that, like, the presidents who owned slaves, that was pretty bad. Most of the presidents did some bad stuff. In fact, I'd say all of the presidents did bad things. Like, I would not be surprised if Teddy Roosevelt was the only S tier we have, because the bad things he really did were outside of his presidency, which is what I'm really rating here. So, all presidents did bad things, right? It's just some pretty bad stuff. So I'm going to put him in C tier, above probably most. He's above average, but, well, actually, C tier is below average, but you get it. He's like right in the middle. Now we have Harry S. Truman. He ended World War II, which was nice, but he started the Korean War, which I'm not a big war guy, I've said. So, not a huge fan of, like, these proxy wars. And the big thing, Truman, you think the nukes dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? The basically slaughter of an insane amount of Japanese civilians, which I just don't think it's justifiable. I understand why he felt like he needed to do that to end the war, but still, I have to put Harry S. Truman in F tier. Because of that, I'm sorry. We have Eisenhower. He created the interstate highways. He was very anti-communist. He ended the Korean War. He served 2 terms. He was Republican. 1953 to 1961. He was 62 when he was elected. Old Ike. He was pretty good. I might put him in A tier, honestly. Eisenhower. Yeah, I think I'll put him in A tier. He was pretty good. JFK. Oh boy, he was 43, very young guy. Tragic what happened to him with his assassination. He had the Bay of Pigs invasion, which ended horribly, you know, because that led to the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was handled. He did handle it, you know, so he kind of made up for his mistake there. He attempted to disband the CIA, which is interesting, right? That's, I think, where a lot of the conspiracy theories come from, where that his assassination was like an inside job, or, you know, performed by the CIA, called by LBJ, you know, that kind of stuff. Overall, though, I'm saying B tier. Yeah, I think that's a fair spot for JFK. There's a lot of what ifs, of course, because he was assassinated. I think if he had 2 terms, he would be different. Maybe he'd be A, maybe he'd be S, maybe he'd be C, maybe he'd be D, maybe he'd even be F. But from what we can see right now, I'm putting JFK in B tier. Lyndon B. Johnson. He's a Democrat. Actually, JFK. I like JFK. I'm going to put him like top of B tier. Yeah. Um, I think there was a lot of corruption in the CIA. I think there was. There still possibly is. This might seem crazy, but I'm putting JFK in A tier. Like, I'm putting him below Washington. I'm putting him below these guys. But I'll put him at a low A, I like JFK. I recently visited the JFK Museum where he was assassinated. Very interesting stuff. Now, let's go into LBJ. Um, he had Medicare and Medicaid. All right. He had the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed discrimination in the workplace, which is good. That's good, right? But he escalated the Vietnam War. Which really is not good. I'm not a war guy. I've said that. I keep saying that. So I'm gonna put him in C tier, LBJ, because he did do some good stuff with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So anti-discrimination is good. Good major steps there. Now we have Nixon. He withdrew from Vietnam, so ended that war, which is nice. He created the Environmental Protection Agency. It's a good thing. But he had the Watergate scandal, where he resigned. So this is a big thing that he was remembered for. The Watergate scandal. I'm not going to explain it all here. Lots of people have talked about it before. This is tough, though, because besides the Watergate scandal, I think Nixon was relatively decent. I think I'll put him in C tier. Now we have Gerald Ford, who never got elected, ever, but was still ended up president somehow. So he pardoned Nixon, which that's expected, I guess, and that's fine. There was an economic recession during his presidency, and he boosted oil production. It's fine. I mean, probably combated the economy, but hurt the environment. Gerald Ford. Ooh, this is tough. I'm between C and D tier. I think I'll put him in D. I don't think he's as good as the C tier presidents. Now we got Jimmy Carter. We had the Camp David Accords, which brought peace between Egypt and Israel, which is great, right? But then there was economic downturns, which bad. There's the Iran hostage crisis, pretty bad. Jimmy Carter did do some great stuff post his presidency, but we're not really counting that, right? So I have to put Jimmy Carter in D tier. Half the list is D tier. Maybe more like a third, but still. Alright, here I think is where we start getting controversial. Yay. Ronald Reagan, Republican. He was 69 years old when he was elected in 1981. He served 2 terms. And yeah, he ended the Cold War, which is great. right? But he also had the Iran-Contra scandal, you know, not so great. But the big thing was supply side economics, or Reaganomics, or trickle down economics, however you want to call it. Um, yeah, the supply side economics, it did really help during the time Ronald Reagan was president. Of course, it really helped the economy, you know, but I think the long term effects have been generally negative, unfortunately, right? Ronald Reagan, of course, also had like the war on drugs, uh, you know, but uh, I think I'm gonna put Ronald Reagan in C tier. I think that'll just make everybody mad. Um, yeah, I think that'll just make everybody mad. Um, but that's a compromise. I think I criticized some other presidents for making everybody mad with a compromise, you know. But that's what I'm doing because I'm a hypocrite. But, you know. George H.W. H.W. He had one term. He had the goal for Americans with Disabilities Act. Disabilities. So helping them out. It's a good thing. There was also a recession during his time of presidency. He was also part of the CIA or the FBI, I forget which one, before he was president, so didn't have a lot of like insight into his presidency as maybe you would have wanted. So HW started a war, right? Not really my cup of tea there. Had a recession, so not fantastic for the economy. Americans with Disabilities Act was nice, but if that's what I think it is, hold on. Americans with Disabilities Act. Yeah, protects them from discrimination. Yeah. So that's a good thing, right? Progress, but HW, I'm also gonna put in C tier. All right. Now we move on to Bill Clinton. We're gonna go more and more political as we go on. I'm trying to look at this as a purely apolitical, what did they do for this country, what did they do to hurt this country kind of view, right? So making that clear as we go on, because this is where we really are getting political here. So Bill Clinton, he was a Democrat. He was impeached because of the Monica Lewinsky scandal. Obviously, that's not good, right? Because he had power over Monica Lewinsky and used that power to receive favors from her. We'll put it that way. So that, not a good thing, all right? He was impeached for that. He had welfare reform. He had the North American Free Trade Agreement. So again, Bill Clinton. I think Bill Clinton I'm gonna put in D tier. I don't think he's quite as good as some of these other guys. Nixon got impeached, but C or D? That's really what I'm struggling. I think I have to put him in D tier. Yeah. Now we got H.W.'s son, George W. Bush. From 2001 to 2009, he served 2 terms. He started the War on Terror because of 9/11, which was tragic, right? Obviously. I was not alive during 9/11. Shocker, yes, I was born after 2001. But still, the repercussions of that and the War on Terror did affect my life greatly still. So this is very personal to me. That was a big thing. Looking back on George W. Bush's presidency, I don't think he handled the War on Terror maybe as well as he could have. Like, at all. You know. There was also the 2008 financial crisis, which was largely his fault, and Obama didn't help it that much. You know, spoilers. There was Hurricane Katrina, which he handled pretty poorly, but that wasn't all his fault. You know, natural disasters happen. But I think George W. Bush is also D tier. Yeah. Yeah. So, now we're into the 3 most recent. Now is really when everybody's gonna hate me, no matter what. Alright, we start off with Barack Obama. He served 2 terms. He was 47 when he was elected. In 2009, he served until 2017. He was our first black president, which is neat. That's a good thing, I think. He did have Obamacare, which I think was a good idea, but the execution was not really there. He had the Iran nuclear deal, which again I think was a good idea, but the execution wasn't really there. You know, like the Iran nuclear deal. Iran? I'm gonna say Iran. Because they let them stockpile uranium, right? Some of it, just not enough to create bombs, you know? Just not enough to create nukes. So it gave them the right to have uranium, which I don't know if Obama was tough enough on them, you know? But yeah. Obama did legalize gay marriage, though, which I think is a positive thing. I think almost everybody will agree that's a big positive. But a thing to keep in mind, everybody, George Bush and onwards, has been like having war in the Middle East. And we're killing like a lot of civilians, you know, like more than really we should, you know, which is really terrible, really tragic. But Obama, I don't think he was a bad guy. He legalized gay marriage, you know, he did some good stuff. I'm gonna put him in C tier. Yeah. Now the most recent 2. Oh boy. I could end the video now and just not rank these 2 guys, but what fun is that, you know? Okay, Donald Trump, Republican. He was 70 when he was elected. Jesus. 70 in 2017. He served until 2021. He served 1 term as of right now, the 6/16/2024. Because he's running again, so who knows? Maybe he'll have another term. It'll be either him, Biden, or maybe Bobby Kennedy. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe I'll make some more content on that once we get closer to the election. But he had general deregulation, tax cuts, immigration enforcement, just standard modern Republican stuff, you know. He maintained peace with North Korea. That's a big thing. He was tough on foreign countries. He was really tough on like Russia, China, Israel, Palestine. Well, maybe not Israel, but he didn't start any new wars, basically, because he was tough. He was, you know, and he maintained peace with North Korea specifically, which could have been a nuclear war. But he prevented that, which is great, right? The COVID vaccine was developed under him. He had a massive rollout for that, which is great. The rollout was continued by Joe Biden, which is good. But it started with Trump. He was impeached twice. I don't even remember what the first time was for, if I'm being honest. Why Trump impeached first time? Oh, yeah, for like 2020 election. Not 2020 election. Election interference in like 2016, whatever. I don't. A lot of people are saying he was like colluding with Russia, whatever. I don't think that was true, if I'm being honest. And he wasn't removed from office for that. He was impeached a second time for inciting an insurrection, which I think was more justified, because of January 6th, you know. Which I think we can all agree that it was a pretty dumb move. Like, come on, man. You really should not have done that. That wasn't gonna end up any positive way, you know. As well, he had 34 felonies, right? Which he did do, apparently. Like, I don't think anyone else would have been held accountable for those felonies. I think it is good that he is being held accountable, but I don't think he's getting the same treatment as the other rich elites, you know, just because I think a lot of the media is against him, which, like, sure, but I think we need to be tough on everybody, not just Donald Trump, you know? And last thing, he says the election in 2020 was stolen. I'm not saying voter fraud doesn't exist. Of course, it happens. I just don't think there was enough voter fraud to actually influence the election, you know, at all. So, all that being said, where am I gonna put Donald Trump? C tier. He did some good stuff. He did some bad stuff. I think C tier is fair. Now everybody's gonna be mad with me because I didn't put him in A tier or S tier, and I didn't put him in F tier, you know, or below F tier. I didn't make a new tier specifically for him. I just put him in the middle because that's really truly what he was. He was mid, right? He was a fine president. He maintained peace. He didn't get us into any more wars. But he's not a politician. He did some bad stuff, you know? Like most presidents, he did. I think that's a fair placement. Now, Joe Biden, elected in 2021 at the age of 78. That means Joe Biden is now 81. That is insanely old. Which brings us to our next point, that he clearly is not all there mentally. I hate to say it. It's tragic that his mind is gone, but you can really tell. Which is awful, because he's the leader of our country, or my country. He may be watching this from a different country. But he's clearly deteriorated mentally since the 2020 election, where when he became president in 2021. Because, going back, watching those debates, he was sharp mentally, which is why he won against Trump. Just not anymore. He stumbles over sentences. He has to be told what to say. It's really tragic, because I hate to see anyone like that, But moving on, he had student debt relief, which I think was good. There's the Green New Deal. A bit of an economic depression, I think we all know prices of everything are kind of crazy right now. You could partially blame that on Trump, on COVID, on Joe Biden. Whatever you feel most comfortable blaming it on, I won't blame you, because I think it's a mix of all of that. But, Biden isn't really doing a whole lot, Yeah, I think he may be more of a figurehead for the Democratic Party than a real president, unfortunately. And now we get to possibly the worst thing Joe Biden did, which was his withdrawal from Afghanistan, which normally I would be like, hey, that's not a bad thing, getting us out of a war, But it's the way he did it. He really, really messed it up. We left lots of equipment and people there. It just was not a good time. That overall, though, I don't know where I want to put him. I don't. We can knock S, A, and B out of the way, alright? I don't know where to put him. Because it's really hard, because his approval ratings are really bad, right? And I understand if you really don't like Donald Trump and you want to vote for Joe Biden, that's perfectly understandable, right? If you don't like Donald Trump, you just want to vote for the other guy. Joe Biden happens to be the other guy. But I just don't understand how anyone could really like Joe Biden, Because, I like Joe Biden as a person, even as a politician in his earlier years, but he's just not mentally fit for presidency, I think. He could prove me wrong. I hope he proves me wrong. He's president, after all. He is the sitting president. But we'll see in his debate against Donald Trump coming up. I think it's 2 debates even, potentially. But as far as I can tell right now, Joe Biden is not mentally fit to be president, which makes me have to put him in F tier, unfortunately. Because I'd like Joe Biden to be a lot better. I think a lot of people would. Because he has done some good stuff, like student debt relief, right? Like, that's not a bad thing. Um, but yeah, so yeah, I guess that's my list. So here's our top five and our top nine. Number 10 would be, I don't know, but that's our top one, top five, top nine. You know, so yeah. Uh, I'd say there's probably only five presidents I really like. The rest I'm just meh about. Which is awful because I love this country, but you know, we have some bad stuff has happened in history. They can't all be good. So yeah, that's my tier list. Let me know what you would change, what anything that you think I got wrong or am misinformed about, or just if you disagree on an opinion. So yeah, see ya.